Daesh makes its last stand in Iraq's Kirkuk province as hundreds of thousands of Iraqis remain internally displaced. Hello and welcome. I'm Ali Mustafa with a special edition of Strait Talk from northern Iraq. 3 years ago, a few thousand men armed with assault rifles and hand grenades defeated the US-trained Iraqi army. They captured Iraq's second largest city of nearly 2 million people and declared a new state. But over the course of a brutal 2-year reign, Mosul shrank to just under 500,000 people as Daesh unleashed a wave of terror. Hundreds of thousands of people fled from their homes to IDP camps in northern Iraq. Iraqi forces, the Peshmerga, and Iranian-backed Shia militia eventually retook Mosul earlier this year. But the fight against Daesh continues in its last stronghold of Hawija. Our correspondent John Hassasu reports from Kirkuk.
It's a journey through one of Iraq's most disputed territories. We pass the Bey Hassan oil field, the largest in oil-rich Kirkuk province. It's outside the Kurdish regional government's borders, but the Peshmerga have taken firm control. Nearby, Daesh is making a last stand in the town of Hawija. Surrounding them are Peshmerga on one side and the Iraqi army on the other. With tensions rising between Baghdad and Erbil over the recent KRG referendum, the Peshmerga are preparing for all eventualities. Kurdish forces established a defensive line on the high ground. Daesh-controlled Hawija, the largest district in Kirkuk, is west of the bunkers. These trenches behind me is to protect Kurdish Peshmerga forces against Daesh attacks from Hawija. On the other hand, Iraqi government fears that these trenches one day may become the new border of the Kurdish regional government. Iraq's armed forces have Daesh in their sights. With each passing day, they retake more territory from Daesh. Helping them are the battle-hardened Turkmen People's Mobilization units. But for these Turkmen, Daesh isn't the only concern.
عقلانية وصدى هيد عراق بومزوندو ها بومزو نجدير بيري يغبت وش كين جرام مرحلة من لا تمزدا إن بس بيجون برضايق يعني كالكيجي دارخ يعني آيري يدارخ بعد هاردا دا برشة وصايوز ديوز بستواجد دارخ حتى من لا تمزدا فعلا.
The recent referendum in Iraq's Kurdish areas have divided former allies. The Iraqi army and the Peshmerga fought against Daesh together, but after the referendum, there are fears they may soon fight each other. For now, all eyes are set against Daesh in Hawija. But as the battle nears its end, another conflict with much larger stakes for the future of Iraq may be looming closer. John Hassasu, Strait Talk.
And to get the latest on the battle for Hawija, I'm joined from Baghdad by Khalid Mefreji. He is the MP representing Kirkuk province, where Hawija is located. Thank you for joining us, Khalid. There are believed to be an estimated 2,000 Daesh fighters and their families left in Hawija. What is the importance of this town in the fight against Daesh?
After 2014, Daesh took control of Hawija when the Iraqi army retreated. Following that, we coordinated with the central government to form a Sunni force that would liberate the area from Daesh. But the Iraqi government didn't help us. Neither did the Kurdish-controlled Kirkuk government. So we are still waiting for the Iraqi army to liberate Hawija. They have already liberated Nainawa, Mosul, Salah ad-Din, and Ramadi. Liberating Hawija is a priority for Kirkuk province, because without Hawija, the Kurdish forces will continue to control the majority of Kirkuk province. When Hawija is freed from Daesh, then the balance of power will return to the province.
Khalid, Kirkuk is an oil-rich region. How does the Peshmerga control over the city and the area change the way the government in Baghdad will deal with Kirkuk in the coming days?
First of all, the oil that is produced in Kirkuk belongs to the central government in Baghdad and not to the KRG. I told you Kirkuk is a province that is not part of any regional government. It is just like Mosul, Basra, and Karbala. All of the salaries are from Baghdad. Its economy depends on Baghdad. It is directly connected to Baghdad. So the government in Baghdad should take control of the oil in Kirkuk. And it should be the one to make decisions on how to produce it and export it according to the law. What is actually happening now is that part of the oil wells are controlled by the KDP, and another portion of the oil wells are controlled by the PUK. This is illegal and unconstitutional. This goes against the interests of the people in Kirkuk. We do not know where the oil money is going. The people there are hungry, poor, and unemployed, even though Kirkuk has a lot of oil. But the money from the oil is going into the pockets of the Kurdish parties only.
Khalid, what do you think will happen in Hawija following the referendum in the Kurdish areas of Iraq? Specifically, what do you expect Baghdad to do?
The fight right now is being led by the Iraqi forces only. The Peshmerga were not allowed to take part in these operations. What we expect is that the Iraqi forces will control all of Hawija, reaching the dirt barrier where the Peshmerga are positioned. This will either lead to an understanding or a direct conflict. One possible deal would be for the Peshmerga to retreat from these particular places to their positions before June 10, 2014. If they don't, then the Iraqi security forces will directly engage the Peshmerga forces. This will create a big crisis in the province, and we don't want this. The Kurdish parties should take this into careful consideration.
And Khalid, how are the Arabs and Turkmen who you represent in Kirkuk reacting to the referendum in the KRG?
Today, I personally asked Prime Minister Dr. Haider al-Abadi to go himself to Kirkuk and to take with him Iraqi government troops like the Iraqi army and the counterterrorism forces to take control of Kirkuk province and to replace the Kurdish forces that are currently in control there. Because these are partisan forces, they represent Kurdish parties and do not represent the people of Kirkuk. He told me that this would happen, and he told me that the government and the Iraqi army are going to Kirkuk. Today, the Arabs in Kirkuk and the Turkmen in Kirkuk are facing provocations, kidnappings, and assassinations on a daily basis. What this means is that there is an ongoing operation to drive Arabs and Turkmen out of this province. That is why we expect within a month the Iraqi government to return to control the province. That is why we expect that within a month the Iraqi government will return to take control of the province. If not, we will go to the international community to ask for protection for Arabs and Turkmen from the ongoing provocations, kidnappings, and assassinations.
Khalid Mefreji, thank you for joining us from Baghdad. Still to come on Strait Talk. How could a death cult like Daesh win the hearts and minds of thousands of people? We look at the conditions that led to its rise and ask what will it take to eliminate Daesh. And forced to flee for their lives, we meet the families who fled the horrors of Daesh and the scars they left behind. Often lost in the headlines of every military campaign is the human cost. With images of tanks rolling into downtown Mosul, we often forget that those war zones were once thriving neighborhoods, a place for families. Those forced to flee the horrors of war often end up in places like this, far from the comforts of what they used to call home. Many are now picking up the pieces of a shattered life, as Umer Kablan explains.
This is West Mosul, in ruins after fighting between Daesh and Iraqi forces and their Peshmerga allies. Estimates put the death toll as high as 40,000. According to Iraqi officials, more than 600,000 people have fled Mosul since 2014 to camps such as this one, and the conditions here are dire as well.
زوجي والله بالموصل وابوي مرض شرك سرطان بالمثاني وسوى بال20 عملية وحالتنا منوبة ما استاعد اي والله ومتنا من الجوع والله تحفينا تصلخنا الا العالم تصدق وتجيب لنا.
Her 10-year-old daughter helps out at the camp in their struggle for survival. Children uprooted from their homes and education are the biggest victims of the war. Others, eager to go home, say the Peshmerga aren't allowing them to return.
هسه مناطقنا متحرر ليش ما نرجع؟ نريد لنا سبب يعني يقولون لنا انتم لا ترجعون، تو واحد يقطع الامل انه يعيش حياته. هسه احنا قاعدين بالمخيم ما نعرفش نعيش، والله استعلمنا ننام نفكر لا يعني يصير بينا شيء. هذا صار لنا 4 سنوات يعني مو قليله.
Many others at the camp want to return home too, but they say they need to be assured their security. After Mosul was liberated, the Iraqi government hailed it as the end of Daesh. The scourge of terror may have gone, but there's uncertainty about what comes next. And the threat of Daesh hasn't disappeared. The terrorists have left behind a divisive ideology in a nation deeply scarred along geopolitical and sectarian lines. As Iraq tries to figure out how to put itself back together after being divided by terrorist groups, civilians are hoping for a lasting peace after years of war and invasion. Umer Kablan, Strait Talk.
And to discuss the situation at IDP camps in northern Iraq further, I'm joined by Rizgar Ubaid, who's a representative of the Barzani Charity Foundation. Tell us the number of internally displaced at these camps and the kind of problems they're facing, Rizgar.
دەستپێکردنی ئۆپراسیۆنی ئازادکردنی مووسڵ تا ئەمڕۆ ئێمە 5 کەممان لەم سنوورە کردەوە کە لە ئێستادا زیاتر لە 71,000 کەس تێدا نیشتەجێ کراون کە دەکاتە 13,300 خێزان و هاتنی خێزانەکان لە ئێستادا نەماوە چونکە پرۆسەی ئازادکردنی مووسڵ بە تەواوەتی تەواو بووە تەنها مایتەوە گەڕانەوەی خێزانەکان کە کوچی پێچەوانە دەستی پێکردووە نزیکەی 130,000 کەس لە کەمپەکانی ئێمە تا ئێستا گەڕانەتەوە ناوچە ئازادکراوەکانی خۆیان.
We see a lot of kids, a lot of children. What about schools at the camps and education for them?
لەگەڵ دروستکردنی هەر کەمپێک کاتی ئێمە دروست ئەکەین بیر لەواکەینەوە قوتابخانەیان بۆ دابین بکەین بە تایبەت بە هەمانگی لەگەڵ ڕێکخراوی یونیسێفی نێودەوڵەتی لە هەموو کەمپەکان قوتابخانە دروست کراون و قوتابیان پار ساڵیش خوێندنی خۆیان کرد بۆ ئەم ساڵیش پرۆگراممان هەیە کە لە ئایندەیەکی نزوکدا لە هەفتەی داهاتوودا خوێندن لە کەمپەکان دەست پێ ئەکاتن.
So the UN is involved for the education and UN agencies are providing it as well. What about these trucks? Are people going back home after a year?
ئەوەی ئەیبینین کوچی پێچەوانە یا خێزانەکان لە ناو کەمپەکان دوای ئەوەی ناوچەکانیان ئازاد کراوە لە مووسڵ ئەگەڕێنەوە سەر ژیانی خۆیان وەکیش ئەبینن کاتی خێزانەکان ئەهاتنە ئێرە هیچ شتێکیان نەبوو بەڵام ئەمڕۆ سەرجەم کەلوپەل و پێداویستی ناوماڵیان هەیە لەگەڵ خۆیان ئەبەنەوە بۆ ناو مووسڵ لەوێ ژیانێکی نوێ دەست پێ ئەکەن.
It's been 1 year since the Mosul operation. Why are the camps still here?
ما بەس لە دروستکردنی ئەم کەمپانە سەرەتا بۆ ئەوە بوو شوێنێک بۆ خەڵکی مووسڵ دابین بکەین بۆ ئەوەی لە شەڕ و شوور بە دووریان بگرین و سەرکەوتوو بوون لەوەشدا وەک ئەبینین ئەو ماوەی ساڵێکە پرۆسەی ئازادکردنی مووسڵ بە تەواوەتی کۆتایی پێهاتووە و خەڵکەکە ئێستا پەیتا ئەگەڕێتەوە بۆ ناوچە ئازادکراوەکانی خۆیان و لە مووسڵ ژیانی خۆیان بەسەر ئەبەن.
Rizgar, thank you so much.
سەرچاوە گەلە بخێر بێن سەرچاوە مەمنون.
Daesh's success in drawing thousands to its cause was no accident. It was a formula used by countless terror groups that came before it. But in 2014, something different happened. For the first time, a terror group captured vast amounts of territory and held it. Was it good timing, or were the false promises given to those who had absolutely no hope too enticing to ignore? Aisha Jamal explains.
The great Mosque of Al-Nuri in Mosul, Iraq. It was from here that Daesh leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared his self-proclaimed caliphate 3 years ago, and where Daesh admitted its own defeat by blowing up the site. Infamous for its beheadings, public executions, and recruiting child soldiers, Daesh was still able to recruit a steady flow of fighters for years. What would cause someone to join a terrorist group? Well, when Saddam Hussein's government was toppled, the Iraqi army was disbanded. This left thousands of angry and unemployed former soldiers, prime recruits for Daesh. Thousands of others, mostly from the Middle East and Europe, also joined Daesh, who offered promises of utopia and a cause to fight for. Always flush with cash, the terror group was able to pay out more money than many would have made at home. And sectarianism in Iraq also played a large role in their rise. Many Sunnis gave up on the Shia-led government in Baghdad and tolerated the group when they moved in. In neighboring Syria, Bashar al-Assad's regime took advantage as well. During the Arab Spring, Assad released prisoners who had fought in Iraq, hoping that they would join terror groups and delegitimize the Syrian opposition. Many of them would go on to join Daesh. In 2014, the group launched a campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Yazidis in northern Iraq. Shortly after, the US intervened as part of an international coalition. And now, Daesh has lost most of its territory. But does that mean their end is near? What's needed in the fight against terror is not only military force, but a strategy to counter their ideology. Otherwise, Daesh might once again exploit sectarian and ethnic tensions to its advantage. Though military action is necessary in dealing with such a group, is it enough? And how do you defeat an enemy that sees victory in death?
And for more on what led to the rise of terror groups like Daesh in the first place, we're joined by Salome Anderson from New York. She's a journalist and author. Thank you for joining us, Salome.
Thank you for having
what
me.
are the main factors that led to the rise of Daesh in Iraq and Syria?
Well, there's multiple factors at play there. I would say a lot of the responsibility lies with the U.S. invasion of Iraq. After the invasion, President Bush disbanded the Iraqi army, so there was a large population of unemployed military-age men. Then the Ba'athist members of Saddam Hussein's Ba'athist government basically exploited this population and weren't above turning to radical Islam as well. Then also America would capture jihadi terrorists and put them in a camp called Camp Bucca, where they were further radicalized and they built the ISIS leadership, and then they were released. And then also sectarian tensions in Iraq. Basically, the U.S. was sponsoring the Shia government of Nouri al-Maliki, which led to much resentment and feelings of marginalization on behalf of the Sunni population. So there were a lot of factors just waiting for a group like ISIS to rise.
Salome, Hawija is the last stronghold of Daesh in Iraq. If it falls, will it be safe to say that Daesh has been finally defeated in Iraq?
Well, I think militarily you can say that they will have been defeated, but it's much harder to defeat the ideology of Daesh, because the first thing that ISIS does when they take over a territory is set up schools. And they have, the people that go to these schools are poor, uneducated, impressionable, and they inject their ideology into this new generation. Now, after, these places have been liberated, a lot of these children are being placed in refugee camps under very terrible condition. And they are just being left to radicalize further, and they have these grudges already against the Iraqi government and America, as well as the U.S.-led coalition is mounting airstrikes that are taking a higher and higher casualty toll on the Iraqi and Syrian people. So, there's a large population now of bereft loved ones with a grudge against America. And lastly, the sectarian tensions that led to the rise of ISIS in the first place haven't really been resolved. So I think it's going to be much more difficult to prevent the rise of another group like ISIS.
Can Daesh be defeated solely by military means? What will it take to defeat Daesh ideologically, Salome?
I think it would take a lot of post-conflict effort, reconstruction, a lot of work by the Iraqi government to calm these tensions, to prevent sectarian retaliatory violence against Sunnis, which is happening quite frequently now. And also with the children who have been radicalized, there needs to be a large effort to rehabilitate them, to give them psychological counseling. But this all takes resources and inclination that I don't feel like is really there.
Salome Anderson, thank you for joining us from New York.
Over the past several decades, few countries have suffered more from the horrors of war than Iraq. From chemical attacks by their own government to a brutal occupation by the US that scarred a generation, to the atrocities by a terrorist group that promised utopia but instead unleashed hell. The people of Iraq have endured unimaginable hardship. Long a thorn in Saddam Hussein's regime, the Kurds of northern Iraq would feel the wrath of his brutality on the morning of March 16, 1988. Iraqi warplanes, armed with mustard gas and a deadly nerve agent, bombarded the town of Halabja. When it was all over, 5,000 men, women, and children were dead. Thousands more would succumb to the effects of the chemical agents long after the attack. Launched in March 2003, Operation Iraqi Freedom would usher in a new era of violence that the country is still reeling with today. After a 7-month-long standoff, the US military unleashed a massive assault on the city of Fallujah in November 2004. The controversial use of depleted uranium shells on civilians is believed to have led to dramatic increases in cancer rates and infant mortality. Filling the power vacuum left by the US, Daesh fighters swept in from the north in 2014 to take nearly a third of the country in a matter of weeks. After capturing Camp Speicher in June of that year, Daesh terrorists massacred, which some estimate was up to 1,700 captured Iraqi soldiers.
It's easy to describe what terrorism is, but explaining why someone would commit an act of terror is far harder. What drives young men and women who have their whole lives ahead of them to use violence against innocent people, even at the cost of their own lives? Daesh was able to recruit tens of thousands of people into its ranks, not because it paid well, but because it provided a perverted sense of meaning to those who felt left behind. It was also able to occupy entire cities, deceiving people that it offered something much better. When military planners in Baghdad and Washington pick bombing targets, they're rarely thinking about what drove someone into the arms of groups such as Daesh in the first place. To them, the use of military force is the only way to defeat what is perceived as an existential threat. But that logic has been proven false in the ruins of Mosul and elsewhere. After Daesh is vanquished militarily, another group with a different name and agenda might fill its void. So maybe we need to think of terrorism as a recurring illness, a virus that is constantly evolving and growing immune to countermeasures. Throwing more medication, or in this case more bombs, won't solve the problem. One must address why someone is getting sick in the first place. The ultimate question then is, what can cure the ideological allure of groups such as Daesh? Tell us what you think online at #StraitTalk. And that's all for this edition of Strait Talk from Northern Iraq. We'll see you soon next time. Take care.